From the MPBN studios, I'm Jennifer Rooks, and this is Maine Calling. We are coming to you live from the Schoodic Institute at Acadia National Park. It's time for a celebration here. For 100 years now, Acadia National Park has invited visitors to enjoy its wildlife, bike trails, coastline, and breathtaking views. Acadia will mark its centennial throughout the year with special events and festivals for all ages. We will talk about what's planned for the celebration, as well as the history and challenges at Maine's beloved national park. With me here at the Schoodic Institute, Kevin Schneider, Acadia National Park Superintendent, Mark Ferry, President and CEO of the Schoodic Institute at Acadia National Park, and David MacDonald, President and CEO of Friends of Acadia. And as always, we want to hear from you. What does Acadia mean to you? What do you want to know about its future? Our phone number, 1-800-399-3566, 1-800-399-3566. You can send a brief email to talk@mpbn.net, tweet at Maine Calling, or post to the Maine Calling Facebook page. So exciting to be here with you. And Kevin Schneider, I understand you've been here about 5 months. What a time to start your new job, huh?
This is an amazing time to be here, Jennifer. And first, thank you for broadcasting today from Acadia National Park and Schoodic Institute. It's a pleasure to have you here and telling the story of Acadia to Maine citizens. We appreciate it.
And you came from Grand Teton, I understand. What are your first impressions here at 5 months in?
I've been here since January, and this is an amazing park. It's an amazing community. The reception that we've gotten has really been fabulous. I mean, to have a centennial celebration like we're having. I've worked in and around national parks in one way or another since I was 17 years old, and I have never seen anything like the kind of celebration that's occurring for Acadia this summer. It is blowing my mind, frankly.
And tomorrow is a big day, right? Tomorrow, one of these bigger events that's happening throughout the summer will be happening at the park.
Yeah, tomorrow we're really celebrating science in Acadia National Park and the role of science here at Acadia. You know, national parks have been known for being these wonderful places to camp and to visit and to hike, but really they're also places for science. And in order to manage them into the future for the next 100 years, we need to have good science available to us. So tomorrow we'll really celebrate the role of science in Acadia.
All right. Speaking of science, Mark Ferry, that brings us to you. You are head of the Schoodic Institute here. It is all about science here as you in the next peninsula down east.
Well, we're very much about science. We're dedicated to advancing ecosystem science, but equally to learning for all ages. And we really focus our efforts on the connections between the two. So engaging the public in science to benefit their education outcomes and to benefit the research. And as Kevin said, it's vitally important for the park, but it's vitally important for our broader region and our communities that we understand the rapid environmental changes that are happening and how they're affecting our natural and cultural resources.
And I'm going to take a step back because I think a lot of people don't know what the Schoodic Institute is, what its relationship with the park. We are here not on Mount Desert Island, but on the Schoodic Peninsula, and we are in a location that used to be a Navy installation, correct? Give us some background.
That's right. So our campus here, which is called the Schoodic Education and Research Center, is within Acadia National Park on the Schoodic Peninsula. And the history is that this was a Navy facility created to listen to the North Atlantic. And technology changed. The Navy no longer needed to be here next to the ocean to do that. And this land reverted to the National Park Service. And the park went through a process of thinking about its future with the community and came up with the concept of dedicating it as a research and learning center. So Schoodic Institute is the nonprofit partner in that equation. We're based here, but we work throughout the park and throughout the region as well.
And I've been here before when a school group is here. I know that kids throughout Maine can come and stay for a few nights and do science, but there's also science kind of on the other end, right? Sort of top-notch scientists in residence. Can you tell me about some of the work going on with them?
Sure, absolutely. So we have a great staff here, but our leverage really comes from attracting other researchers into partnerships with Acadia and to do their research here. The park is an extraordinary destination for science, and we're building awareness of that as a protected area with commitment to long-term stewardship. And because of our location where diverse ecosystems meet at the edge of the North Atlantic, it's a perfect destination in science that's important to all of us.
David MacDonald, you head an organization called Friends of Acadia. What does Friends of Acadia do?
Thank you, Jennifer. We are an organization through which people are able to give back to Acadia National Park. And for some, that means volunteering out on the trails. For some, it means making a financial contribution. For others, it means advocating for the park with their elected officials. So all sorts of ways that people want to give back to this place they love so much. We've been around about 30 years now and work very closely with the park on a whole range of issues, many of which are highlighted during the Centennial.
Okay. So I know that there are a lot of issues at Acadia, but I think the biggest one might be summarized as saying how to help this park that's so well loved stay a wild place that will continue to be loved. The challenge of balancing the number of people who come every year with the beauty of the park. How do you do it, Kevin?
Well, it's a huge challenge for us, and I think this year is going to probably be among our busiest years ever in Acadia National Park's history. Already during the month of May, our visitation was up 12% during the
From
month of
last
May.
year?
Yes.
Which was a record,
May of
right?
last year, yes. And so I wouldn't be surprised if for the first time in Acadia's history, we push over 3 million visitors. And that will really be a mile marker for us. We're among the most visited national parks in the United States. And so the real question we're trying to address is how do we manage for increasing visitation? Again, if you compare 2006 with 2015, our visitation is up about 35% over that 10-year time frame. So if you add another 35% over the course of the next 10 years, if those trends hold up, how do we deal with that? How do we address that? And those are really important questions. We want to make sure we're continuing to provide a really high-quality experience. We want people to come here and just have a lifetime experience that's going to make them want to come back. And so how do we do that in the face of increasing visitation? We know there's not enough places to park if everyone wants to park their car in Acadia National Park. And so we have an incredible bus system in the Island Explorer, which is operated by Down East Transportation. How can we leverage that bus system for the next, 50 years, really, of visitor experience? And so we're going through a process right now, a transportation planning process, in which we're looking at these questions.
I understand that last year there were a few days when you had to close the road and not let anybody else in. Do you anticipate that happening again?
Well, last year we had to close the Summit to Cadillac Mountain about 8 times, and it was really because you just couldn't get an emergency vehicle up there. It became so gridlocked. These roads were not designed for the number of people that we get. They're historic roads that were really designed by the Park Service in its early years, by John D. Rockefeller Jr., so there's really an important historic character to them that we want to maintain. And so the transportation plan is going to look at exactly those kind of questions of what's the best solution for a place like Cadillac, where you have a lot of people that want to go up there, especially for the sunrise. That's become very, very popular. It's a spectacular place to be, and certainly recognize that, and we want to continue to provide that in a really high-quality way.
It's some irony, Mark, that we're talking about crowds, because here at the Schoodic Peninsula, there really are not the crowds. What should people know about this side of Acadia?
Well, I think Schoodic is a lesser known but fabulous part of the park, and the park has planned for Schoodic to remain a quieter experience. And that's part of what's special about the park, is that there are places that people can still have that kind of unique, special experience, whether it is here or whether it is on a trail that requires a little more effort. And I think it's also good for all of us to recognize that visitation is not just a challenge for the park. It's one of the park's reasons for being. And it's an opportunity to reach a lot of people with an opportunity to learn about the resources that are here and how they may interact with them.
All right. Well, David, I know that another of the challenges is funding. You believe that this park is underfunded, and you do a lot of advocacy on behalf of the park. Can you characterize, what you believe, at what level you need it, the park needs to be funded, where it is now, what needs to be done?
Sure, thank you. In broad numbers, the park's support in terms of an appropriation from Congress, from the federal government, has been largely flat for the last decade or so. So there were years where it went down a little bit. Meanwhile, people's expectations for the park, the visitation, the season in which they're visiting are all going up, up, up. So there's a gap, and the cost of doing business has also gone up. So in rough numbers, Congress appropriated about $8 million last year to run Acadia National Park. That's a really small number for a park as big and complex as Acadia. Again, rough numbers, it took about twice that number to actually operate the park. So they get money from Friends of Acadia and Schoodic Institute, other nonprofits. They get money from selling park passes. They get some project-specific money, but Kevin and his staff are just doing everything to stretch every hour, every staff, and it's a shame when you look at how loved this place is that the federal government can't appropriate enough to actually take care of it. The amount that is given to parks nationally is a fraction of 1% of a person's typical tax bill, what they're paying. And polling shows across the nation, every constituency, every age demographic, region, every party believes that parks should be funded more strongly. So the numbers are very high in support. It's challenging to get it on the front burner down in Washington. We've got a great delegation here in Maine. All of our senators and elected officials go to bat for Acadia, but it's a very competitive situation in a tough fiscal climate right now.
We're talking about Acadia National Park. We are actually broadcasting live from the Schoodic Institute on the Schoodic Peninsula, part of Acadia National Park. If you'd like to join the conversation, the phone number 1-800-399-3566, the email address talk@mpbn.net, tweet at Maine Calling, or post to our Facebook page. Kevin, are those the two big issues, the transportation and the funding, or is there something else that keeps you up at night?
Well, I think as we think about our Centennial and think about what the next 100 years at Acadia is going to be like, one of the fundamental issues that we have to address is climate change, and that fundamentally could be one of the greatest threats to Acadia's resources. When you have a changing climate into the future for the next 100 years, we don't know exactly what is to come. And so adapting to that is going to be a real challenge that we're going to face.
Mount Desert Island famously had a very large fire in the last century. David, is there a concern about evacuation, about fire danger, especially we're bringing this show to you after we've had a big stretch of dry weather here in Maine?
It is always on people's mind. What makes Acadia very unique is the way in which the boundary wraps in and out of the communities. So whether it's fire, whether it's transportation, you name it, the solutions are not made in isolation within the Park Service. They're made in collaboration with dozens of surrounding communities. And fire is a great example of that, where the park does collaborate with local fire departments to think about strategies and approaches. And that's exactly what happened in 1947 when the Great Fire happened. The towns and the park were really united in their efforts to fight that fire and then build back after it. So it was a terrible event. We hope it never happens again, but it also forged and reinforced that bond between Acadia and the communities.
I'd like to talk about volunteers. All three of your organizations depend on them. I remember the first time, Kevin, that I came across folks who would come back every single summer to volunteer. I didn't realize there was a place where they camp. There's an entire community of people who do this every year. Can you talk about that subculture, the group of people who come and help you every year?
Yeah, you bet, Jennifer. We've got an amazing volunteer program here. And in fact, you asked about my first impressions. One of my first impressions is I think we have one of the strongest volunteer programs throughout the United States National Park System, and that's really thanks to Friends of Acadia and the work they do to help organize our volunteers. But, we have sort of two broad categories of volunteers. We have a lot of young folks who are interested in volunteering their time. Maybe they're thinking about a National Park Service career. Maybe they're looking for something fun to do for the summer. And then we also have this camp of folks who are retired, and they've retired, in some cases as lawyers, doctors, CEOs of corporations, and they want to contribute their time and give back to Acadia National Park. So there's a huge amount of work that we couldn't get done otherwise without our volunteers. Our volunteers are out on the trails contacting visitors. They're creating the beautiful carriage road signs that are historic in look for us. So there's tremendous, tremendous work that gets done by our volunteers.
All right, and Mark, I want to ask you about some of the citizen science going on here at Schoodic. What kind of projects are underway?
Lots of different projects, and everything ranging from opportunity for people who might be casual visitors to submit their observations so that we learn about the biodiversity here in the park, or learn about the timing of seasonal events like flowering or fruiting and migrations. We have a Bio Blitz coming up, which is an opportunity for people to be involved with others in volunteering. That is in July, the weekend of July 21st, and they could look at our website to learn more. But this year during the Centennial, we'll have both professionals and amateurs helping to document the diversity of butterflies and moths in the
Okay,
park.
butterflies, because every year there's a different theme.
That's right.
So this year it's butterflies and moths. And what this means is somebody can sign up, and there are hundreds of people who take part in the Bio Blitz, correct?
Typically, it's a smaller group that works on it for the whole weekend, but people can drop into public programs and participate, and those will be at the Schoodic Woods Campground and opportunities there to bring a larger audience in. And we hope as we go forward that we'll see larger and larger groups of people participating on their own time, on their own schedule, submitting their observations. We're still gaining a basic understanding in some ways of the biodiversity of the park, and it has changed dramatically over 100 years. We know that a lot of plant species that were documented early are now lost. Up to 20% of the plants that
Wow.
were formerly in Acadia can no longer be found here. So we anticipate those types of changes continuing, and the more information we have, the better we understand those changes, the better the park will be able to respond and steward its resources for all of us into the future.
Do you have a favorite story, a favorite discovery, or something that has happened with one of your citizen scientists or one of the scientists in residence?
I don't know that I have a single favorite discovery. You mentioned we use different taxa for the BioBlitz in different years. One thing that's striking to me is beetles have been used several times, 3 times. And out of all of the species that are identified each year, a substantial portion are new that year. We've not documented them previously.
New to the park or new to science?
New to the park, not
Okay.
necessarily new to science, but each year we do document some species that are, in addition to being new to the park, never before recorded in Maine, and we believe that last year we likely may have discovered a species that may have been new. So always changing, but I think that the fundamental thing is that there is a lot we don't yet know. We know enough to understand that change has been dramatic, and we know enough to know that we need to be thinking very proactively about how to respond.
All right. Well, we do have to take a break. When we come back, we'll get to your comments and questions. Stay with us. This is Maine Calling. Welcome back. This is Maine Calling. I'm Jennifer Rooks. Today on the program, we are live from Acadia National Park. With me at the Schoodic Institute, Mark Berry, who's president and CEO of the Schoodic Institute at Acadia National Park, David MacDonald, the president and CEO of Friends of Acadia, and Kevin Schneider, Acadia National Park's superintendent. We invite you to join the conversation. Call 1-800-399-3566. Send a brief email to talk@mpbn.net. Tweet at Maine Calling, or post to our Facebook page. Joining us right now by phone is Catherine Schmidt. She's a science writer with the University of Maine Sea Grant Program and author of several books, and most recently, Historic Acadia National Park, published in May by Lyons Press. Catherine, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So in researching your book, what's the most interesting thing that you did not know before about Acadia?
That's a tough question. There's a lot of interesting things. I think one thing that stands out is that there's a pretty significant African-American history to Acadia National Park. In fact, it's at Schoodic, the Schoodic portion where you are now, where the first non-Native American settler who came to the Schoodic Peninsula was a man named Thomas Fraser, and census records indicate that he was African-American. And he was the first one really living there and developing a fishery trade and trading in fish and lobsters and salt. And that story it was just really surprising and led me to research a little more about the history of people coming to Schoodic. And there was another family, the Ober family, that ran a lobster pound in another part of the peninsula.
What do you hope the general public understands about Acadia, not only its inception, but what it means to people today?
I think one thing is the incredible, you talked earlier about all of the volunteers, and I think the love that people have for Acadia is really just immense and never-ending. And that love is really what gave us Acadia in the first place. It's what drove people to want to conserve and create Acadia National Park. And that love really comes from a sense of place that you develop if you spend any amount of time in the park.
Do you have a favorite spot in the park?
Oh, it changes. It changes from day to day. So lately I've been spending a lot of time in Northeast Harbor. I wrote about Astiku Gardens and Thuya Gardens, and Joseph Curtis, who is a very sort of another interesting character with ties to Acadia's history. And so that area of the gardens and interesting history has been a favorite lately.
Do you think that the founders who made this possible 100 years ago could have ever envisioned what Acadia National Park would have become?
I think that they do. I think that they could have envisioned it. I think that their vision was always very large, and I think that they would be very pleased, especially with the. Acadia is the only park that was created from private donations, and I think they would be incredibly pleased to see that legacy of land conservation has spread from Acadia throughout Maine, across the country, and across the world.
That's right. My understanding is this was one of the first land conservation organizations in the country.
It was. It was inspired by a man named Charles Eliot, who spent several summers camping on the island and actually doing science on the island. He and his fellow Harvard undergraduates, they called themselves the Champlain Society, and they did some of the first natural history surveys of the island. In fact, that statistic that Mark mentioned of having lost 20% of the plants, we know that because we have the records of the plants that these young men collected in the 1880s. And the time that they spent on the island led their leader, Charles Eliot, who was son of Harvard President Charles William Eliot, to enter the field of landscape architecture. And he did a lot of writing in the 1890s about the need to conserve special places like Mount Desert Island. And he formed the Trustees of Public Reservations in Massachusetts, which is actually celebrating its 125th anniversary this year. And then he died prematurely. He was in his 30s, and he passed away. And his father was very inspired by his deceased son's writings and then went to George Dorr, and they got together and formed the Hancock County Trustees of Public Reservations, inspired by the Massachusetts organization, which was the first land trust. So the Hancock County group was the first one in Maine and one of the first in the world.
Well, Catherine Schmidt, how will you mark the Centennial? Will you do something special?
I have a lot of speaking engagements. I'm looking forward to Science Day tomorrow in the park. There's a series of Centennial lectures. I'll be talking about Charles Eliot and the Champlain Society in August. And I'm also really looking forward to the Windjammer Parade up Somme Sound.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Catherine Schmidt is a science writer with the University of Maine Sea Grant Program and the author of Historic Acadia National Park. Thanks for joining us, Catherine. And we're going to move on now. We're going to go to Michael, who's calling from Herman. Hi, Michael. Go ahead.
Hi there. I just want to say thank you for having this. This is great. Thank you to everyone who is doing their level best to forward the park. I love Acadia. Been going there for many years, as well as my family. My question is a couple of fold. It's more on fees on the first part, and I heard that the park pass for the summer is gone to $80, and I believe it's $25 now for 7 days. I haven't verified that, so you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it kind of felt to me like, actually I was dealing with this today and yesterday, and the show was so perfect timing. Could it be addressed on like how the fees are arrived at, who approves them, and what you think the future might be as far as fees? It kind of feels like it's becoming a little bit like a wealthy tourist place.
Michael, we have the superintendent right here. How do we arrive at? Is it true that the fees, if you buy them this week, are $25 for a pass, and then it goes up?
So we have several passes. One is we have a $25 pass for a week. That's great for a family who's visiting from out of the area, and that's typically what they'll purchase. We also have a couple of year-long passes. We have a Acadia pass, which is $50, which gets you into Acadia National Park. And actually, if you buy it in December, it's half price. It's $25. So that's kind of a deal for locals to buy it in December for the year, and that'll work, and you can come in as much as you'd like for $25 into Acadia. If you're 62 or over, you can actually get a Golden Age pass, and that's only $10, and that's good for your lifetime. And a Golden Access pass also allows people who are disabled, permanently disabled, to get into all national parks for free as well for their lifetime. There's also a military pass. If you're active duty military, it's a free pass for active duty military. And if you're a fourth grader, fourth graders are actually getting into all national parks across the United States for free as well. But the revenue that we get from our entrance fee revenue is really, really important revenue for us. 40%, half of it, about $10 of the entrance fee, the $25 fee, goes to fund the Island Explorer bus system, and that funds almost half the Island Explorer bus system's cost. And the other portion is used for deferred maintenance projects throughout Acadia, so trying to fix our maintenance backlog and correct and cure visitor services here in the park. So, I think in the context of taking a family out to the movies or something like that, actually, your entrance fee at Acadia National Park is actually often more cost-effective than going out for an evening for the movies. And all of those passes that I mentioned, all get the entire family in, whoever's traveling with you in your vehicle. So it's not a per-person fee even. So for $50 for the year, you can get a pass to Acadia. For $80 for the year, you can get a pass that'll get you into all national parks. And if you're 62 or over, it's the best bargain out there. It's only $10 for your life.
All right. Well, Michael, thanks so much for your call. We're going to move to Bangor and Louie. Hi, Louie. Go ahead. You're on Maine Calling.
Hi. Thank you. I moved to Maine 45 years ago. Retired a couple years ago. I've been to Acadia many, many times. And I am hoping that those people involved in nurturing and maintenance of the park, besides all the, bureaucratic issues and the physical work and the academic work, are recognized by us citizens with the gratitude that they deserve. So I hope I speak for many in saying that I am deeply grateful for all the work they do, because it is the kind of work that is from the heart and given to so many. So thank you for taking my call. I'll turn off the phone and turn up the radio.
Thank you, Louie, for your call. David, tell us about some of the volunteers you've worked with for a long time.
Oh, they come back. I mean, they know the park better than I do. I mean, they really do everything from being out on the trails to help orient visitors with questions. We've got a special crew who works in the winter grooming the cross-country ski trails. They're out on the snowmobiles in sub-zero weather. So, as you said, all ages. And Acadia's program is quite unique, that allows drop-by visitors who just happen to be there for the week to come in on drop-by hours on Tuesdays and Thursdays and Saturdays to spend a day of their vacation, clearing the trails or working out on the carriage road. So it really runs the gamut, and that is the ethic that prompted the formation of Friends of Acadia 30 years ago. We didn't have staff at first. It was all volunteer driven.
So Tuesday or Thursday morning, how does that work? What time do you show up if you want to do that?
You show up at 8:30 at the park headquarters, the administrative headquarters on McFarland Hill. They meet in front of the flagpole in the morning, and the crew might be 2 people. The crew might be 24 people who show up, and we have volunteer trail crew leaders, and we hire a couple of seasonal folks who help organize those crews, adapt to what happens to show up that day, and go get a lot of work done.
Okay, Mark, you were going to say something?
Well, I want to echo the great appreciation for the volunteers, and a lot of them work here at Schoodic and with education programs as well, or welcoming visitors at the Welcome Center. But I think I also heard in Louie's call an appreciation for the people in uniform that are working in Acadia. And certainly I think David and I would strongly share that, and I know Kevin greatly appreciates his team. There's a really dedicated group of people working for the park, and Acadia attracts some of the best and brightest out of the Park Service. They really want to be here.
All right. Well, we want to go to a question from right here in the auditorium. This is from Jane in Winter Harbor. She says, regarding the marina on Sargent Street, how can the new ferry be protected? So why don't we even broaden that question? Tell us about the ferry and then the marina.
So that's probably for me. Schoodic Institute has helped with the creation of a new facility called the Schoodic Marine Center at the former Winter Harbor Marina. And it is the Schoodic terminus for ferry services across Frenchman Bay to Bar Harbor. This year there are two. So two different ferry operators, one connecting at College of the Atlantic and the other connecting in downtown Bar Harbor. For the Institute, the Marine Center is about an opportunity to maintain access to and from the ocean for research and education and for transportation for the community. Making connections between Mount Desert Island and the Schoodic Peninsula by water is a way to have low-impact visitation over here. People can bring their bikes on the ferry or rent bikes after they get over here, or they can ride the Island Explorer. But it's also a great addition to quality of life for people on the Schoodic Peninsula, whether residents or visitors.
So if you were to drive from the Bar Harbor here, it's about an hour drive. What about on the ferry? How long does it take to get from Schoodic to College of the Atlantic?
It might be between 30 and 45 minutes, and obviously can be a much nicer experience to be on the water versus behind the wheel.
Behind the wheel in the traffic in the summer. Is it a seasonal ferry?
It is. Two operators, as I said, and they're both running this year, Memorial Day to Columbus Day, matching the season of the new Acadia National Park campground at Schoodic Woods.
All right. Well, we're going to move on. We'll go to Frederick, who's calling from South Portland. Hi, Frederick. Go ahead. You're on Maine Calling.
Hi, Jennifer and guests. I don't know, Jennifer, if you know that you were off air for a period of time, but we heard that you had just had a brief conversation, a brief comment about the funding of the park, and I wanted to bring that conversation again so that we all can hear how vital it is that our tax monies support such incredible national and natural treasures such as Acadia. And I wanted to know what kind of, not only is it such a treasure in its glory and its ecological beauty, but what are the positive economic inputs to our economy out of such a nominal tax base? And I have to say that we have to hold conservatives and Paul Ryan and this austerity mentality, take that to task at looking at this gorgeous treasure that we have. So please address the lack of funding that we have, or the inadequate funding, let's say.
All right. Well, Frederick, thank you for your call. What was mentioned earlier, if you all did not hear that on the air, is only about half of the budget. Is that correct? Do I remember correctly? Kevin, is covered by the federal government, and the other half from fees and other sources. Accurate? Did I paraphrase that right?
It's a little bit. It's about $8 million that comes from Congress, plus another $4 to $5 million of project funding that also typically will come from Congress, and then we collect entrance fees that are worth about $3 million a year. So it's a total of about $15 million. The vast majority of it does come from federal appropriations from Congress, but a portion of it does come from our entrance fees, and then we also do receive funding from Friends of Acadia as well, and that's very, very important to us as well.
And David, what do we know about the economic impact? A very recent study, right?
Exactly. Each year, the Park Service does a great job of analyzing what the economic impact is, and I think the latest study was around $250 million of annual economic impact in the surrounding communities. Over 3,000 jobs directly related to the park and its existence. And I mean, I grew up on MDI, and most of my classmates and friends, in one way or another, their livelihoods tie back to the park, whether you work at the bank or whether you work in a restaurant or a lot of the nonprofits that have sprouted up. Acadia has inspired a lot of that activity. And again, what I said earlier is Maine's congressional delegation has been terrific, but parks nationally face what I feel is quite dramatic underfunding. You'll hear reference to a maintenance backlog, and Kevin probably has the numbers better than I do, but there just is not enough money to take care of these resources adequately, particularly in the face of the growing interest in use and visitation. So part of what we do, not enough of, but at Friends of Acadia, is we really encourage people to convey that love that was expressed earlier to their elected officials so they know how important the parks are personally and also economically here in Maine.
All right, the number 1-800-399-3566. This is Maine Calling. We have to take another short break. Please stay with us. Welcome back. I'm Jennifer Rooks. You're listening to Maine Calling. Today on the program, Acadia National Park celebrates its centennial. With me, we're here live at the Schoodic Institute. David MacDonald, who's president and CEO of Friends of Acadia, Kevin Schneider, Acadia National Park's superintendent, and Mark Berry, the president and CEO of the Schoodic Institute at Acadia National Park. We have a question from here in the audience. Are there parcels of land promised to the park in the future?
Park has been, throughout its history, we're fortunate to have had very, very generous people that have donated lands. And as you said earlier in the program, that's really what made Acadia National Park what it is today. So we're very, very fortunate. There are a handful of privately owned parcels within the park, and we're always interested in acquiring those to really complete the park. We have conservation easements outside the park that we were the first national park in the United States to use conservation easements, so that when you stand at the top of Cadillac or one of the other summits in Acadia, you can look out on these islands and see these undeveloped views and see this sort of pastoral landscape that's been preserved. That's really important to us. And so, you know, we are trying to acquire in holdings within the park. We've got a major land and water conservation funding acquisition that we're doing this year with Friends of Acadia, with Maine Coast Heritage Trust as our partners to help us get that done. So that's a really, really exciting project. But Acadia will always be a little bit of a work in progress as we try to acquire those parcels and try to protect views even outside the park through partners like Friends of Acadia and Maine Coast Heritage Trust.
And David's nodding. This is from Mike in Bangor, an email. Two commercial touring companies aside, the ability to take the Island Explorer to the Cadillac Summit would greatly alleviate the traffic load on the road and parking areas. Having already paid to get into the park, I don't want to have to pay a tour company to ride to the summit, so it leaves me and hundreds of others no choice but to drive to the summit. And if I'm taking my vehicle into the park for that reason, I might as well just use my vehicle to go to all of the other places. So are there discussions about the Island Explorer perhaps going to the top of Cadillac Mountain, David?
The Island Explorer, or maybe a cousin of it or a version of it in the future. It's very interesting. The history of the Island Explorer, which has been in existence about 16 years now, and through a great public-private partnership, LLBean has supported it. The Park Service, as Kevin said, the entrance fees. We've taken about 6 million riders off the road and riding those buses. It just started yesterday for the season. When it was first getting started, cracking the nut of Cadillac was so challenging in terms of the volume and the kind of special vehicle you needed to get up there, that the initiators sort of put that aside for a minute and said, let's design the system for the rest of the park and get underway with that. And we've yet to circle back to Cadillac because it would take a different kind of vehicle. The numbers that need to go up and down are daunting, so it would be a very expensive, resource-intensive undertaking. I believe that will emerge from the transportation plan that's now underway as a very important option to be able to make available to people so that you don't have to drive or you don't have to hike to get up or hire a private tour. I think it will be a terrific addition to the Acadia experience, and I hope it's one of the outcomes of the plan that's now underway.
And that goes with one of our questions from here in the audience. Kevin, can you tell us more about the new transportation management plan for Acadia? How will it take shape this summer?
Well, we'll have some preliminary alternatives coming out this summer for public review. So stay tuned into September for those preliminary alternatives. And that's an extra step in the process that we've done because we really want to get extra public input on this planning process. It's a very, very important plan to Acadia's future. And so that'll be an opportunity for the public to share with us their thoughts about this very topic. About mass transit. What's the role of mass transit? We'll have some preliminary alternatives. They'll be like concepts that are going to come out for public review, and so that'll be the starting point. We will not have a preferred alternative, so there's no decision that's been made. Our minds are really open, and we're really trying to listen to the public. So the caller's point is a very good one, and David makes also a good point about the Island Explorer, and how do we re-envision the Island Explorer so that 25 years from now, you can still have this wonderful experience in Acadia.
All right, we're going to go to Ellsworth. Patty and David, go ahead. Hello.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, thank you. David and I are just coming home from 56 days on the road visiting other national parks and state parks on the East Coast and the South. And this is our first day back in Maine. And we're thrilled to be coming home. We want to thank all of you for what you give us here, and just the joy of living here is really indescribable. Thank you, particularly to David MacDonald, a former colleague, who we are delighted heads Friends of Acadia now. So I'll just get off the air with a bounty of gratitude for what we have. Thank you, Jennifer.
Well, Patty, thank you so much for calling. And we're going to move on to Kathy, who lives nearby. Hi, Kathy. Go ahead.
Hi, Jennifer. My husband is one of the very active members of the MDI search and rescue team, which works very closely with the rangers. They train 4 days a month year-round, and they're all volunteers. And I would just like someone to talk a bit about safety in the park. It's a smaller park, so sometimes I think that gives visitors a false sense of security. That and cell phones, they think they can get themselves into any situation and just, call for help. There's a wide range of abilities for hiking and climbing and swimming, and I would just encourage everyone to be safe and to thank those volunteers who work endlessly.
Kathy, thanks for your call. Comments?
Safety is very important to us. We want people to have a great visit, but we also want them to be safe. People are bringing their families here. It's important they go home at the end of the day in the same condition they started the day in. And so, before going out, I think it's important that people realistically assess their abilities. Not everybody has to do beehive or precipice. Make sure that you're bringing water, bringing food, bringing snacks, wearing appropriate footing. Don't go out on a trail up Cadillac wearing a pair of sandals. That's probably not going to be appropriate. Wear sturdy shoes. So those kinds of things are things that we can think about. We have lifeguards at 2 of the beaches, at Sand Beach and at Echo Lake Beach. That's really important. But stop in at a visitor center and get information. Talk to a ranger about what you want to do. The Hulse Cove Visitor Center for a lot of people is right on the way into the park. And start your experience at Acadia National Park there or at Sur de Mont, and talk to a ranger. Talk about what you'd like to do and get their ideas.
All right. Thanks so much for your call, Kathy. Another question from here in the audience. Can you speak about the privatization of services in the park as opposed to government-directed and run services? What services are privatized and which are not?
Well, the concession operation at Jordan Pond House is a private operation. It's operated under a concession contract with the National Park Service. There are several other private operations within Acadia. Wildwood Stables, for example, is another private operation. And then, of course, there are private tour companies that go throughout the island. So there are several commercial operations in parks, and they really help provide the experience for visitors, because obviously the National Park Service can't do it all, nor should we. And so those kinds of opportunities are all provided under a contract with the private sector to help us with that.
All right. Well, we're going to go back to the phones. And Mark, calling from Belfast. Hi, Mark. Go ahead. You're on Maine Calling.
Hi. How are you guys doing today?
Great.
So I just wanted to comment and just first and foremost, I'm in the mental health, behavioral health field, and I work with at-risk youth and have been doing so for about 6-7 years now. And the highlight of working with this population, and especially the job I was at prior, was the annual trip to Acadia National Park. And just wanted to comment just to kind of simply say that it's just quite amazing to see 10 young men who, say that they are the toughest kids in the entire world between 13 and 18 years old, and then get them up to Acadia National Park and really watch them just do something they've never done before in their entire life. And it's just wanted to comment about how amazing that Acadia is, and, the fact that it's not just a vacation spot for people. I mean, it really is a place for people and kids to kind of do something they've never done before and to kind of challenge themselves. So because of that, Acadia kind of sits pretty highly on my list of places and things to do. And not only that, but my wife used to work for the Maine Department of Conservation, so she did a lot of trail work up there. So Acadia is high up on our list of one of the best things about the state of Maine. So that's all I wanted to say, and just wanted to point out that there are some significant therapeutic benefits to that beautiful area up there, and can't wait to get back up there.
Well, Mark from Belfast, thanks for calling. Mark Berry.
Well, thank you for that comment and a reminder of how valuable these outdoor experiences can be for our youth, but for all of us. They really do a lot for our health. Every time we get out in nature, the science is actually quite strong about how good that is for us. And we see it every year here at Schoodic Institute in partnership with the park. About 800 students come through for a 3-day experience every fall. And students from all across Maine see their national park for the first time, sometimes see the ocean for the first time, always have new experiences, and we hear from them and from their teachers how powerful that is.
All right. Well, moving on, we're going to go to Damara Scotta and Brian. Hi, Brian. Go ahead.
Hey, guys. Great show. As I heard the fellow earlier who said not being able to take the Island Explorer to the summit of Cadillac leaves no choice but to drive. Knowing, of course, that particular caller and many people might have mobility limitations, for a lot of us, of course, isn't another option, which is to walk up there. And it got me wondering how somebody like Superintendent Schneider and others, what's the strategy for sort of encouraging non-motorized recreation and really getting the message across to people that, like, hey, it helps congestion if you get out of your car. It boosts your experience of this landscape if you get out of your car. And getting that across in a way that, yeah, is respectful of people's limitations and also doesn't come off as sort of browbeaty or lectury. Can you talk a little bit about how do you get that message out there?
Okay, David MacDonald, without being browbeaty or lectury.
I can start and then turn to Kevin. But Friends of Acadia has worked for a number of years on a couple of concepts. One is this notion of village connector trails. So if you're staying in downtown Bar Harbor, we've tried to work with the Park Service to build trail routes, actually recreate ones that were probably there historically, so you can walk outside your hotel, down Main Street, get on a trailhead, and walk up Cadillac Mountain from downtown Bar Harbor. So we have these village connector trails in many of the communities around the island to encourage exactly what the caller is saying. The other thing that we experimented a bit the last couple of years is having some very limited car-free mornings in the park where the motor roads are shut down to automobiles. And in the spring and in the fall, you can come with your bike, you can come with your jog stroller, whatever you want, and walk down the middle of Ocean Drive. And it's a completely different experience, and I think has opened some people's eyes to trying the park without your vehicle. The whole premise of the Island Explorer is leave your car at your hotel parking lot and come on into town, pick it up at the Village Green, and go explore the park. But I couldn't agree more. The absolute best way to enjoy the park is to get on your bike, get on a trail, and get away from those parking lots and motor roads. It's fantastic.
The best experiences I've had in Acadia National Park have not been behind the wheel. They've been out on a carriage road or out with my hiking boots on the trails, and that's really where the inspiration takes place. And as Mark, one of the previous callers, said, you know, those are the therapeutic benefits too, and they do apply to all of us. And I know this weekend myself, I'm going to enjoy this beautiful landscape on my own time out in the park.
All right. We have an email from Brendan. He writes that he works for the Mount Desert Island Historical Society and that yesterday they opened an exhibit on the Champlain Society in the museum in Somesville, and he puts in parentheses the Arched Bridge. So that exhibit is open from 10 to 4 every day. One of the many activities this summer at Acadia National Park. We can go onto your website, correct, and find out more of the events. The actual anniversary is July 8th, but Kevin Schneider, you're not really encouraging people to come to Acadia on July 8th, are you?
I think people can come anytime this summer, this fall, this winter, and help us celebrate our anniversary. It's a great time to be here. You can go to www.acadiacentennial2016.org and learn all about the events that are occurring here this summer and learn about our partners that are helping to support this amazing place. Well,
thank you all for being here today, and thank you all of us in our auditorium here at the Schoodic Institute. If you haven't made the ride past MDI and come to the Schoodic Peninsula, highly recommended. Spectacularly beautiful place. Kevin Schneider is Acadia National Park's Superintendent. Mark Berry, President and CEO of the Schoodic Institute here at Acadia National Park, and David MacDonald, President and CEO, Friends of Acadia. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Jonathan Woodward ran the board today. Allie Burns answered your calls. We had additional technical support from our own John Bradford and from the Schoodic Institute's Jim Randall. You can find past editions of Maine Calling as well as a link to our audio archives by visiting mainecalling.net. Today's program will be rebroadcast this evening at midnight, Maine Calling is produced by Jonathan. Oh, excuse me. We are reading an old script this evening at 7. You can hear this program this evening at 7. Maine Calling produced by Jonathan Smith and Cindy Hahn. Monday on the program, join me for a conversation about the role of contemporary art in Maine. Brand new museum, CMCA, opening this weekend in Rockland. I'm Jennifer Rooks. You've been listening to Maine Calling on the Maine Public Broadcasting Network.